What is up, gamers? Welcome back. Welcome back to another episode of Sunday Night Invasions. And Halloween is right around the corner, so this is going to be Spooky Sunday. And I don't really know what's going to make it so spooky, but that's what that's what we're calling it. That's what we're calling it. This makes it spooky. Look at this. Look at all these. Look at all this. What are you supposed to do? What are you supposed to do about that, gamers? What are you supposed to do when there's projectiles and there's waves of gold and there's, look at that. I think that's called Siluria's woe. It's a Siluri of woe. Oh man, it has been a week for sure. Feeling a little bit under the weather this week. I think it's got to do a little bit with the shift in the weather. So I'm from the Midwest, and if you're not familiar, the Midwest isn't really in the middle or the west. I would almost say it's like it's more east than it is west. I'm not sure exactly how it got its name. In the background there, you might have seen that we've already won this invasion though, because we stole 2 items from these goobers, and they weren't the best items. One was a plus 25 serpent bone blade, and the other was a plus 10 meteoric ore katana. And so katana lovers, katana bros here, and we stole 2 of them. The good thing is that they're both max level, and those resources, they're scarce in a playthrough. So Carian Gary's got some new tools, and so maybe we'll get to play around with one of them. But yeah, and you know, when you're invading, things don't always go your way, okay? And especially in these Sunday night invasions that I try to do, where I'm just sitting down for a couple of hours to maybe 3 hours tops on a Sunday evening, trying to get some good invasions, put some clips together to make a little video to put on the YouTubes. You know, things don't always go my way, and especially at the level 168 range, you get some pretty powerful gamers out there, and so, you know, blunders happen, like getting knocked off the edge there. Here we go, the waterfowl dance. Did you know you could parry that? I wasn't sure if I was going to land that parry or not, so you could see I was not prepared to do so, but I did land the parry, and I was pretty happy with that. But hey, you know, and we die afterwards, and it's just kind of how it goes. And so, gosh, I was about ready to row my boat down a tangent talking about the Midwest. I guess we'll have to postpone that for a little bit, because this invasion here, I got to point something out. So I get into this one, and I notice that right away they do something a little bit nasty, a little bit naughty, you know? Get into the invasion, and what do? They turn off the taunter's tongue, you know? And that just, I don't know why, but something about that just kind of grinds my gears, you know? You use the taunter's tongue so that you can lure in invaders, but then as soon as you get one, you turn it off. And I would really love to see that mechanic get changed in maybe in the DLC, in the expansion that we have coming up hopefully soon. I would love to see that just kind of get switched around, where if you turn on the taunter's tongue, it's on until you die. It's on until you go visit the site of grace, because I feel like that's just the silliest thing that they possibly could have done. And because it, you know, turning on the taunter's tongue, it would allow me as the invader to get co-invader, and then we could have a fun, you know, 2v2 fight here with these gamers. And when you have the option to just switch it off whenever you feel like it, it really kind of makes it seem like it was designed for bullies, you know? Makes it seem like you could just turn it on, have them come into your world, turn it off, and now you've trapped an invader here. And I don't really like that. And you know, and that's okay. That's my opinion. Some other people might have different opinions. It doesn't mean that I'm right, and it doesn't mean that they're wrong. But it seems like the old saying, the old phrase, having your cake and eating it too. And I had an interesting conversation with some people in the comment section about a week ago regarding having your cake and eating it too. We were talking about Liza P. And if you haven't played Liza P, One of the toughest parts of the game is the boss fights. Okay, and the boss fights they're tough. They're not very easy. I think that I've considered maybe doing like a little bit of a review of the game. I've got a playthrough of the full game on the channel. You can go check that out if you're interested. But I've considered maybe doing sort of like a review of the game because I do have some thoughts about it, but I'm not going to go into too much detail. But one of the things that I will say about the boss fights and the design of the boss fights is that they're good, but they're not great. And the thing that makes them not great is that the boss moves are sometimes unpredictable. And in a game that focuses a lot on guarding and this mechanic called perfect guarding, which is kind of like a parry, it lends itself to wanting bosses that have sort of predictability in their moveset, and where you can kind of time things out and you know what's coming, and so then you can kind of practice your skill with the mechanics that they've given you in order to take on these bosses. And it kind of lacks that because there's some boss attacks that are a little bit delayed, and sometimes they can kind of switch up their combos. And classic point down by the host and the Phantom there, and that's fine. It's all good. Oh, in this one we're using the meteoric ore blade that we picked up in that first invasion. We're going to try that out. Carian Gary is a strength and intelligence based build, so this weapon actually had some pretty good damage output right on this build, so that was cool. But so I'm very early on in my playthrough of Sekiro, but I've been playing Sekiro lately, and it's one of those games that I've had for a while, but I just really haven't. It hasn't like caught on. I haven't caught the Sekiro bug yet, and I'm hoping that sometime soon that it'll hit me. And one of the things about that game is that it's really kind of like you got to get good. I would say of most of the From Software games, that one, more so than others, is kind of demanding that you figure out the mechanics, especially when it comes to blocking and parrying, in order to take on the bosses. But at the same time, you'll hear a lot of people say that Sekiro is almost kind of like a rhythm game. Like there's almost this like rhythmic quality to the attacks that you can kind of pick up on, and so you can kind of learn how to block and parry these bosses because you can kind of study their moveset. And so after a couple of attempts, you kind of have an idea of what's coming next, and you can adjust accordingly. So with all that said, it's like Liza P, their bosses could have benefited if they had gone with more of that sort of rhythmic combo attack streams that Sekiro kind of focused on. And instead they've got some attacks that are kind of a little bit of a delay, and sometimes they can string together combos that they don't always do, so you don't really know if it's the end of their move or not. Different things like that. So that's all to say that the bosses are tough, okay? They're challenging. They're not very easy. But there's a mechanic in the game called the Cracks Calling where you can summon a Spectre, and the Spectre is like a AI companion who comes in and helps you fight the bosses. And it's pretty common in most of these games to have some sort of a summoning system in order to help you get through, some of the challenging fights and things like that. And of course that's going to lead to folks having varying opinions, And some people think that, if you use the summoning system, then you didn't really beat the boss. That's one of the arguments that I've seen. And that's their opinion. They're welcome to have it. I'm not saying that they're right or they're wrong. I, on the other hand, kind of hold the opinion that it's your game and it's your money, so play it how you feel like it. And so if you want to summon the Spectre to help you out so that you can get past that challenging boss fight and make it to the next bit of the game and continue to experience the story, especially on a first playthrough, that do your thing. There's no reason that you shouldn't engage in that mechanic. And there's even eventually little items that you can use to kind of modify the Spectre that you summon in. So whether it's giving it a little bit of extra damage output in a specific elemental type, or maybe healing your Spectre, things like that. So it's definitely a mechanic that was fleshed out within the game. Same with Elden Ring here, where we have the summoning bell, and we have all of these different spirit summons that we can call upon, and they're given out as loot when we kill bosses. And just throughout the game, we're constantly being given these spirit summons, and it's something that the developers clearly spent time and resources on putting together and throwing into the game, and hoping that the players engage with that mechanic in some way. And of course, in Elden Ring, you can summon in your friends and different things like that. And so having this sort of discussion where I'm kind of voicing the more unpopular opinion, of course, that if you summon a specter, summon a specter. Do what you want to. Again, it's your money that you spent on the game. It's your time that you're investing into playing it. And why should you care if somebody else tells you that you didn't, quote unquote, really beat the boss if you summoned a specter to help you out? And especially in a game like Lies of P, I don't necessarily think that these specters are overwhelmingly powerful, personally. And in my first playthrough, since I was doing a Let's Play that I was uploading to the channel, I just summoned a specter for all of my boss fights. And that I don't think that there was really a single boss fight that we beat on our first attempt. There was maybe a handful. And there's, close to 20 bosses, I think. Maybe that number's a little bit off, but still, of the ones that you can summon a specter to help you with, it's not like we were just easily beating the bosses because we had a specter with us. We still put some thought into whether or not we wanted to use the specific item that could augment the specter, or if we wanted to use a different item in place of it. And there's still strategy that goes into things, and this and that. And so again, the reasons for me doing it were mostly so that we can kind of continue the playthrough, so that I'm not getting walled off by a particularly challenging boss and then spending hours of my time banging my head against the wall trying to beat it. Although that did still happen with at least one or two of the bosses, right? So I'm on that side of the debate, arguing that it doesn't matter if you feel like using a specter, go ahead and do so. And another thing about Lies of P is that there are throwable items. Okay, there are these throwable consumable items that do some pretty decent, pretty significant damage. And at a certain point in the game, you can pretty much unlock the ability to purchase basically infinite amounts of throwable items if you choose to. You'd have to, of course, farm some of the resource called ergo, which is runes or souls in these games, and you'd have to spend some time picking up these items from the vendor. But you could, in theory, do pretty much a throwable only run, and you would be able to get through the boss fights pretty easily, because I don't think that they're balanced around just spamming throwable items. And now another thing that you could do in just about any of these games is you could spend extra time going out and farming for runes or for souls, or in Lies of P, you could go farm for ergo. And you could use that ergo to level up your character and kind of get your character past the almost intended level for different boss encounters. Now, because the game is more linear than some of these other games that have come out, there are certain boss fights where you can't have more than a plus 4 weapon when you go up against them, because you just haven't had access to enough materials to over level a weapon to get more damage. But there isn't really anything that's stopping you from spending an hour or two just finding enemies to farm and increasing your character's level. And in a lot of ways, that can help you either stay alive for longer, deal more damage, whatever it might be. So there are all of these sort of things that you could kind of do when it comes to taking on bosses that could give you an advantage outside of summoning a specter for help, right? And so that's fine. Again, I'm on the camp of play the game how you want to play the game, because it's your money. You spent money on the game. You're spending your time on the game. And especially if it's your first playthrough and you're trying to figure things out and you're intending on coming back to it, it's like riding a bike. You didn't just hop on a bike without training wheels and just go for it. Most of us spent some time getting used to riding a bike. with some training wheels on. And then even when we took the training wheels off, maybe we had somebody who kind of helped us maintain our balance for a little bit while we got the hang of it. And you know what? You probably fell a couple of times. I know I sure did when I was learning to ride a bike. I definitely fell a handful of times. Some gnarly, like flipping over the handlebars, falling. And you learn from that. You know, it's not necessarily the worst thing. It's a learning experience. And so, kind of looking at it as like you're learning how to play this game. Give yourself a little bit of a break. So that's kind of the side of things that I'm on. And I'm also somebody who's big about accessibility. And so the more people that we can get playing these sorts of games, that I'm a huge, like, I absolutely love these games. These games have done a number of things to really kind of improve my life in general. My mental health, my confidence, different things like that, my love for gaming, whatever it might be. And so the more people that I could encourage to play these sorts of games and get excited about the new releases that are coming out, the better. The better, you know. And so having this little bit of discussion, somebody brought up the opinion that you know, summoning companions it's not an opinion that you didn't really beat the boss. It's just reality, is what they said. And they said you can't have your cake and eat it too. And so I was thinking about that kind of that sentiment of like, you can't have your cake and eat it too. And does it apply to the discussion that we were having? Because I can understand how it applies in some situations, but I don't think that it's a universally applicable phrase or concept for a number of reasons. And I think that in the particular discussion that we were having, it's like, I feel like this isn't necessarily the time for that application. It's like, I can kind of have my cake and eat it too. Like if I bought the cake and I want to have it and I want to eat it too, like what's stopping me from doing so? Does that make sense? And again, there's probably a number of people who would disagree with this idea or this mindset, this opinion. And again, I find a lot of times that we have more things, like we agree on more points than we disagree on in general when it comes to people in this community of people who enjoy and love Souls-like games. Like there's a lot of things that we probably agree on more so than we disagree on. And no person has to be right or considered wrong when it comes to sharing and voicing and discussing their opinions. So that was kind of that. But so again, just kind of thinking of this whole idea of having your cake and eating it too, really kind of came to my mind when I went into that invasion and they turned off the Taunter's Tongue. It's like, that's definitely a moment of like having your cake and eating it too. And I don't think that you should be able to have your cake and eat it too in that situation, if that makes any sense, to kind of tie this back around. It's like, if you're going to turn on the Taunter's Tongue, it should stay on, and you should deal with the consequences of that. That's something that I feel like that phrase, that concept could definitely be applied to, where it's like, you can't summon in a phantom, or you can't summon in an invader, like intentionally doing so, and then not also deal with the consequences of having that door left open for other fellow invaders to come in and try to help out. So just kind of an interesting thing that I've been pondering the last week or so. And if you haven't played Lies of P, awesome game. I really enjoyed it. I would highly recommend it. Check it out. I think that it was a breath of fresh air for this sort of genre of gaming. They did a really wonderful job with the story, and I think that was really like one of the strong suits. And not to say that the story is like not a strong suit of some of the From Software games, but if you're familiar with From Software games, it's like the story's not right in your face, you know. Even a game like Bloodborne, which I would say has a little bit more emphasis on kind of the storytelling that's going on, like it's not so overt that it's like right there telling you here's what's up. It's kind of like you got to go dig in and figuring things out, if that makes sense. You got to read the item descriptions. You gotta really kind of put on your thinking hat and piece some things together, and take note of some of the context clues and the areas that you're in, and really kind of flesh out the story on your own. And that leads to a lot of really great discoveries and discussion. A lot of good discourse can happen with that sort of a thing. But I really enjoyed the way that Liza P wasn't afraid to, like, here's our story, here's the story that we're trying to tell, and then there's still some tidbits that you can kind of pick up on and decipher on your own. But there's a lot of it that's kind of like right in your face, like, we want you to experience this, and I really enjoyed that. I appreciated that. So what am I even talking about at this point? Goodness me, it's been about 20 minutes of rambling now, and where are we at? Well, we were going to talk about the Midwest. That was a little stream of consciousness that I was going to go down early on in the video. So I'm from the Midwest, and I was talking about how I was feeling a little bit under the weather, and I think it's mostly due to the weather. We had kind of like a really strange week here. It was like, there was like 2 days where it was almost like 30, 40 degrees Fahrenheit outside, which was like really cold for what it had been. And then there was like 2 days where it was like up in the 60s and 70s. And now come the weekend, it's like, it's cold again. It's down in like the 50s almost. So just this kind of like sweeping range of temperatures, and I think it's kind of messed up my allergies, and it's got me feeling a little strange. And so I was thinking about, like, why is the Midwest called the Midwest? You know, because again, if you looked at a map of the United States and somebody was like, and you were like, where's the Midwest located? And somebody kind of pointed to the general area of the Midwest, you would just kind of look at them like, do you understand what you just, do you understand what West is? You know? And so I was just kind of thinking that was a funny concept. Oh, here we go. So here's our friends again. Brienne. Maybe they're going for like a Brienne of Tarth. I'm not sure. And I was really excited to bump into these folks again. And then here we go. We've got the little turning off of the taunter's tongue. And so I'm thinking, oh great, just another one. And what do you know? What do you know, gamers? You can't have your cake and eat it too, because somebody slipped right through the cracks. Somebody snuck in before you turned off the faucet, before you locked up the doors. Somebody snuck in. So we're going to have a co-invader helping us out on this one. And these two jabronis aren't going to be able to have as much fun with me as they did the last time. All right, back to my... Finish your train of thought, Coobs. So when the United States was first starting out, the first thing that was discovered was the East Coast, right? And we had our 13 original colonies, okay? And that's basically all along the East Coast of the United States. And that's where we started kind of colonizing and setting up civilizations, if you will. And at a certain point, some folks were like, hey, you know what? There seems to be a lot of land out to the west of this area. Let's go explore it. Let's go claim it as our own. And so, you know, the journey into the West occurs, and maybe folks who just felt like they'd have a better opportunity and be able to maybe carve out a piece of pie for themselves, they started heading out towards the West. And so what I think might have happened is some folks started heading west, and then they got a couple hundred miles out of the range of the East Coast, out of the established civilization, and they were like, you know what, let's just call this home, you know. And then somebody was like, but Pa, I thought we were heading west. And he said, son, we are west. We're right in the middle of the West. We're in the Midwest, actually. And I think it just kind of stuck from there. That's what my conclusion of the concept is that it at one point it was west, and then we realized how much more west was west of the Midwest, and so the Midwest is really kind of more like, it's like the East. It's mostly on the East. It's like the Eastern. If you sliced the United States in half down the middle, the Midwest would be to the east of that line. That's just how it would be. So it's kind of funny and interesting, and that's how I think about things. Thanks so much for being here, gamers. Really appreciate you. If I haven't already said that, hope you've been enjoying the video. I know it's been me just kind of rambling about some things. Maybe you agree with my opinions. Maybe you disagree with my opinions. feel free to let me know. If you're like, hey, you know what, Poobs, I'm on this side of the fence when it comes to that topic, and you want to have like a civil discussion about it. I'm all about keeping things civil. I'm all about keeping things, respectful. We can understand where each other is coming from, and we can agree and disagree with each other without it being personal in any sort of way. When I played through Elden Ring the first time around, I did a completely blind playthrough, like I always like to do with these games, and I didn't use a whole lot of summons in the early game. But I'll tell you what, when I discovered the Mimic Tier, that's something that I found on my own, something that I came across down in the depths of Nokron or Nokstella, whichever one of those little cities it is. I found this Mimic Tier, and I was like, wait a second, are you telling me I could basically make a clone of myself? And it's like, heck yeah, you can. And it doesn't even have an FP consumption. I just have to use some of my own health. It's like, yeah, I'm gonna use that. I'm gonna use that Mimic Tier, and so I did, and it made my playthrough a ton of fun. Me and my duplicate just taking on some of these bosses, and it also helped with like the overall sense of like power fantasy that this game, in my opinion, was really going for. Like, there's this kind of concept in storytelling of like the hero's journey, and like this kind of like idea of like a grand epic, like that somebody can kind of, you start with basically nothing. And in my playthrough, I started with nothing. I started as a wretch. I think they're called wretch in this game. And so I had nothing but a wooden club and a loincloth. And so to see like how far my character had made it by the end of the game, where I'm taking on these crazy bosses like Malekith and Melania, and taking on Godfrey in his ultimate form. Like, yeah, man, these are bosses that are worthy of me taking them down with this Mimic Tier. So I don't feel bad about that at all, And again, if I decide to go through the game, which I have multiple times now, without doing any summons, then that's on me as the gamer to not engage with that mechanic. But like, I can remember as far back as like Dark Souls 1 and Bloodborne. When Bloodborne first came out, I had a buddy. Me and my one friend convinced our other friend to pick up Bloodborne, because we just kept talking about how awesome the game was. And truthfully, he struggled to get past Father Gascoigne, because he had never really played a game like this before, And so, and do I judge him for that? Like, absolutely not. Like, these games are tough. If you're not used to it, if you don't really know what you're doing, if you can't really kind of nail some of the mechanics and get them down, then like, I get that. But one of the fun things that we were able to do at the time was help him beat that boss. And so it's like, yeah, he was able to get past that boss because he could summon in a friend or two and have them help him out, and eventually kind of, slowly but surely kind of unravel some of the story. And maybe he'd never beat the game, but he got past that first wall, with a little help from his friends. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. It's part of the game. You're just playing the game, and I think my again, not to beat the dead horse. Hate that term. I wish there was a better term that we could use in place of that. Who wants to beat a dead horse? But not to rehash what's already been said, but it's like, it's your time and it's your money. And especially in this economy, you know what I mean, gamers? Like, it's your money that you're putting down. So don't have so much pride that you say to yourself, I can't summon and I have to get past this boss without getting a little bit of help. Because that's one of the things that I find happens to us all too often in our real lives, where we say, hey, I don't need any help, I can do this on my own. But the reality is like, sometimes we do need help, and especially if there's help that's being offered to us, if we're fortunate enough to have help lended to us, and to not take it, not to not take that help when it's offered, when it could really maybe change things for us, maybe open up a new window of opportunities, or really just kind of change the game for us, then sometimes that's our own downfall, And so yeah, so just my 2 cents, just my thoughts. This was an interesting one. So they were fighting on this big old bridge. They've already killed the Draconic Tree Sentinel there. They decided to do a little bit of taunting because they don't want to come over to my side of the bridge. And I'm not in a rush. I'll stay there all day. And so I do a little bit of taunting, and they end up coming over. But instead of pressing the advantage and coming over one at a time, coming over both at, two at the same time, they do one at a time. So, and oh, boo, spooked ya. Hopefully I spooked ya. I know I was probably talking through that, and so maybe it made it less scary. But it's Spooky Sunday, gamers. You've been here for it. Spooky Sunday, and we just threw a jump scare your way. So maybe we gotcha. Maybe nobody's here right now, but if you're here right now, you're awesome, and I really appreciate you. So thanks so much for being here. And this guy's being a real creep. Look at this. Look at this guy, just sitting here. He's just sitting there waiting. He's just sitting there waiting. They don't even know where he's at. They're searching this whole cave to find the invader, and then they get a notification that says that there's a second invader, and now they're spooked. They're having a spooky time. So ending it on a high note with the Spooky Sunday invasions. Just silly. Oh, and it wouldn't be a Sunday Night Invasions without a word from our unofficial official sponsors here, Aldi Foods. I'm hoping the idea with this whole little bit that I've been doing is that maybe after a certain point, they'll find this video and the previous videos, and they'll say, "Oh, this guy can do a real good ad spot. We should sponsor this. We should sponsor this channel." Because that would be cool. It'll probably never happen, but who knows? Maybe an executive at Aldi Foods is going to stumble across my content because they're an invasion enjoyer, and they're going to be like, "Hey, you know what? We could definitely we could do with a little sponsorship." You ever been to Aldi Foods? It's an experience. It's a shopping experience like no other. They have, if you're not familiar, they have these little mechanisms on their shopping carts, and it's basically they're all chained together. You got to put a quarter into the slot on the cart in order to use it. How about that? Isn't that interesting? And you think, wait a second, I thought that they were supposed to be like, consumer friendly and have low prices for their grocery items. How is it that I've got to have a quarter with me in order to get a shopping cart? Well, that allows them to cut down their costs when it comes to their what we would consider overhead when it comes to paying their employees. Because if you think about a lot of these other supermarkets, they've got a parking lot that's just full of these carts that are just all over the place, and somebody's got to go out there and they've got to corral these carts to the cart corral. And Aldi says, hey, you know what? What if we incentivized people to bring their shopping carts back to the store, back to the front door, and they can get their quarter back if they do so. And then there's also this other little added bonus where if you see somebody coming up to do their shopping and you're finishing up and maybe you're taking your cart back, you could just say, hey, do you need a cart? And they might say, yeah, you know what, I do actually. And then you can have this nice little exchange with that other random stranger. Maybe they offer you a quarter that they were going to use for their cart in return, and now we've just kind of shortened the process. And then you can even say, hey, you know what, why don't you keep that quarter, and you can feel good about it. How about that? Isn't that nice? Wouldn't you like to experience that? That sounds nice to me. So go check out Aldi Foods sometime. The silliest bit that I think I've come up with for sure. Oh, look at that. Spooky Sunday, gamers. Spooky Sunday. Thanks so much for being here. I have been and always will be Coobs. Peace and love to you, gamers. Happy Halloween. Hope you're having a wonderful spooky season.